All right, let's just get straight into this. Welcome back to today's Explainer, where we are unpacking one of the absolutely most explosive decades in early medieval history. We're zeroing in on a 10-year window where a relatively boxed-in group of settlers, known as the Suebi, basically decided to forcibly redraw the map of Europe. We are talking high-stakes, strategic opportunism, massive gambles, and watching a superpower crumble in real time.
So, think about this for a second. How do you conquer half a country in just 3 years? I mean, it sounds literally impossible, right? Especially when the opponent you're up against is the remnants of the Roman Empire. But that is exactly what we're going to break down today. This whole period is essentially a masterclass in how to read a shifting geopolitical landscape, grab the initiative, and ride a wave of momentum so insanely fast that your enemies just can't react.
Section 1. Setting the Iberian Stage.
Okay, so before we dive into this massive outward explosion of conquest, we really need to set the scene and understand where the Suebi actually started. Back in 411 AD, they were completely isolated up in the far northwestern province of Galatia, so think modern-day northern Portugal and Galicia. They were totally contained on this little coastal strip, and they were even sharing that space with the Vandals. Fast forward just a couple of decades, and they hold absolute hegemony all the way down into Baetica and Carthaginensis, the deep south and eastern parts of the peninsula. To get how they bridge that huge gap, we have to look at the guy who set the whole thing up.
Look, before you can dream about expanding south, you gotta lock down your own backyard. King Hermeric spent the 430s aggressively trying to pacify the native Galaico-Roman population, and honestly, it was brutal. The locals fell back to these ancient Iron Age hill forts and just put up a spectacularly fierce resistance. It actually wasn't until 438 AD that an enduring peace was finally ratified. Hermeric essentially secured the home base. And right as he did, well, the torch gets passed.
Section 2. Rechila seizes the moment. The momentum here shifts so fast because a new, much more aggressive generation steps up. Enter King Rechila. He's Hermeric's incredibly ambitious son, and he takes power in 438 AD, practically the minute that peace treaty at home is signed. But Rechila doesn't just want to manage Galatia. No, he's looking south. He spots this massive, critical power vacuum. Rome's administrative grip on the Iberian Peninsula is totally faltering, stretched way too thin by internal chaos and other barbarian threats. Rechila saw that the door was open, and he didn't just walk through it, he completely kicked it off its hinges.
Section 3. The dominoes fall southward.
What happens next is literally the blitzkrieg of antiquity. Roman cities and territories just start falling at a totally breakneck pace. 438, 439, 430, 40, 40, 41, boom, 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 boom. We're not talking about some slow generational migration here. This was a breathless, highly active military campaign pushing relentlessly south year after year. Let's break down exactly what happened as these dominoes fell, starting with the first huge win.
So it's 438 AD. Rechila marches straight into Baetica and crushes a Roman leader named Antivotus at the Genil River. But it wasn't just a battlefield win. The Suebi captured a literal mountain of gold and silver. This is absolutely crucial to understand because war fuels war. That massive injection of looted wealth immediately funded and motivated the campaigns that came next. It basically proved to the entire Suevic army that expanding south wasn't just possible, it was incredibly lucrative.
Then, the very next year, in 439 AD, Rechila targets Merida. And you have to understand, Merida wasn't just some random town. It was the administrative capital of the entire Diocese of Hispania. By taking it, Rechila is tearing out the very heart of the Roman administration in the peninsula. He even made Merida the new Suba capital for a while. Talk about a power move. He is sending a crystal-clear message to the world. Rome is out. I am in charge now.
And the onslaught just does not stop. In 440 AD, he pushes into Lusitania, besieges the super-strategic city of Myrtilla, and actually manages to capture a high-ranking Roman official named Censorius. The very next year, 441 AD, Seville falls. Seville was the capital of Baetica. So with these two rapid-fire back-to-back victories, Rechila officially extends Suebic hegemony entirely across Baetica and Carthaginensis. Think about that. 36 months. That's all it took to basically redraw the entire map.
Section 4. Rome's disastrous counterattack.
Okay, so you can imagine the absolute sheer panic happening back in Rome right now. They've just watched their wealthiest, most vital Iberian provinces get swallowed whole in 3 years. They had to do something.
Enter the Magister Utriusque Militia, the master of both services. This is not some regional governor or border patrol commander. This is the heavy artillery. Rome dispatches General Vitus, a guy holding this incredibly imposing imperial title, signaling to everyone that they are bringing down the hammer to crush the Suebic uprising once and for all.
But here's where the geopolitics get, honestly, incredibly ironic. Rome, the great global superpower, is so depleted that General Vitus has to rely on a massive army of hired Gothic auxiliaries, literally Germanic mercenaries, to go fight the Germanic Suebic state. And Rechila, he doesn't cower behind the walls of his fancy new cities, not at all. He confidently marches his Suebic forces out into the open plains of Baetica to meet Vitus head-on.
The result? An absolute, total humiliation for the empire. In 446 AD, Rechila completely and utterly routs the Romano-Gothic forces. The mighty master of both services, General Vitus, is literally forced to flee the field in absolute disgrace. Rechila entirely embarrassed the Roman superpower in open combat. This was not a fluke. This was a definitive, resounding statement of military supremacy in Hispania.
Finally, Section 5. The Fall of Roman Hispania.
So, as the dust settles on that battlefield in Baetica, the historical reality becomes pretty undeniable. The defeat of Vitus was the literal death knell for Roman Hispania. It permanently shut down any imperial attempts to ever restore Roman administration in the south of the peninsula. Through this one ruthless, brilliant decade of expansion, the Suebi completely changed their destiny. They weren't just rogue settlers anymore. History recognizes them right here as the very first fully independent Germanic successor state in Western Europe. They proved unequivocally that there was life after Rome.
I want to leave you with this to chew on as we wrap up today's explainer. If an empire literally cannot defend its own heartland, is it still actually an empire? The Suebi completely exposed the fatal fragility of a superpower that looked invincible on paper, but was totally hollowed out in reality. Rechila's Lightning War wasn't just some localized conflict, it was the blueprint for the end of the ancient world and the birth of the medieval one. Keep that question in mind as you dive deeper into this history. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.